"I'll give you my salary if you translate this," laughed the Millionaire CEO. But the cleaning lady left her speechless. The morning light flooded the panoramic windows of the 12th floor, bathing the luxurious office in the Chicago Loop with that golden glow typical of a Tuesday in March. The Italian marble floor reflected every movement like a merciless mirror, a silent witness to all the daily cruelties that occurred in that corporate temple. Sophia Hayes strode through the main hallway with steps that echoed authority and impatience. The navy blue Armani suit hugged her slender 38-year-old frame, and the Mikimoto pearl necklace swayed gently against her neck with each sharp movement. Her brown eyes, usually calculating, burned with a dangerous irritation. "Get out of the way," the sharp voice cut through the morning silence. Eleanor Miller barely had time to react. The cleaning cart, with its neatly organized products, was pushed so hard it slammed against the glass wall, causing the bottles to clatter in protest. The bucket of water wobbled dangerously, spilling a few drops on the freshly waxed floor. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hayes." Eleanor's voice came out low, controlled, carrying a dignity that 2 years of daily humiliations had failed to erase. Sophia didn't even look back. To her, Eleanor was just another shadow in the landscape, as invisible as the furniture. She walked through the smoked glass door of her executive office and closed it with enough force to make the walls tremble. Lauren, the 33-year-old secretary who in 6 years had learned to decipher every nuance of her boss's volatile mood, looked up from her computer. The lost contract? Of course. It was always like this when Sophia lost a deal. Someone had to pay, and it was usually those who couldn't fight back. Coffee. Double. Now. Sophia threw her Hermes bag onto the mahogany desk. "And tell the cleaning staff to stop getting in the way. Do I pay a fortune in rent for this office just to have to dodge cleaning carts?" Lauren nodded and left quickly. In the hallway, she found Eleanor still reorganizing the products that had scattered from the impact. At 43, Eleanor had the kind of quiet beauty that goes unnoticed. Brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, a face without makeup, a light blue uniform from the service company that completely hid who she really was. "Are you okay?" Lauren asked, lowering her voice. "Yes, thank you." Eleanor smiled, but her eyes revealed the weariness of someone who has faced much bigger battles than a toppled cart. Inside, Sophia stared at the Chicago skyscrapers through the window, her hands clenched on the sill. $25,000 a month. That was her salary as CEO of Hayes Import and Tech, the company she had inherited from her father. Money that arrived every month without her needing to lift a finger, while people like that cleaning lady probably slaved away for minimum wage. Life was fair that way. Everyone in their place. Her at the top, and the others. Well, the others where they had always been. But the universe Sophia was about to discover had a very particular sense of irony, and sometimes the greatest lessons come from the very people we despise the most. The clock read 2:45 when Lauren entered the office, carrying a thick envelope that seemed to pulse with importance. The paper was heavy, almost stiff, and the colorful German stamps contrasted with the creamy beige of the envelope. "This just arrived for you. Registered International." Sophia looked up from the financial reports, her interest piqued more by curiosity than any real expectation. She rarely received mail from Europe. Most international contacts were made by email. She took the envelope, feeling its weight. These were definitely not ordinary documents. The red stamp of the German Postal Service had that official air that makes any executive pay attention. She tore the edge with the silver letter opener from her desk and pulled out the contents. 3, 4, 5 sheets of letter-headed paper slid out. The paper had a linen texture, the kind important institutions use for serious communications, and it was all in German. "What the hell is this?" Sophia flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning lines of text that might as well have been Egyptian hieroglyphs for all she could understand. "Looks like something from the Nazis." Lauren stepped closer, adjusting her glasses. 6 years working there had taught her to be helpful without being intrusive. "I see official seals, ma'am. And those numbers, they look like figures in euros." Sophia narrowed her eyes, finally finding something she recognized. Numbers, lots of numbers, and all preceded by the obru symbol. 12 million? No, she must have read it wrong. Maybe it was 12,000. "I need someone to translate this." Sophia tossed the papers onto the desk with studied disdain, but Lauren noticed the slight tremor in her fingers. "Call those translation agencies we use." 15 minutes of increasingly frantic phone calls followed. The entire city of Chicago seemed to be out of available German translators. New York had 3, but they were all tied up in projects that would take weeks. Los Angeles offered someone in 10 days. 10 days! Sophia exploded. I need this translated today. Amanda from the finance department, a 40-year-old woman with 20 years of experience in corporate bureaucracy, appeared at the door, drawn by the volume of the argument. Her brow furrowed when she saw the documents. Mrs. Hayes, official documents of this kind always have deadlines. If they're from the German government, they could be legal matters with strict due dates. Sophia felt the first real chill run down her spine. She picked up the documents again, turning the pages more carefully now, searching. There, a date marked in red, underlined twice. 02103, 2025, 18 untouched. She didn't need to know German to understand that. March 2nd, today, 1800 hours, 6 p.m. She looked at the Cartier watch on her wrist. 3:12 p.m., less than 3 hours, and she had no idea what those documents said. Panic has a peculiar smell in corporate environments, a mix of cold coffee, suppressed sweat, and electric tension that makes the air feel heavier. The entire office could feel it. Sophia stood in the middle of the open-plan office, clutching the German documents in her hands as if they were time bombs, which in a way they were. Robert from sales had stopped typing. Paula, at reception, watched with wide eyes. Even the air conditioning seemed to have quieted down to witness the crisis unfold. Someone, Sophia's voice echoed off the glass walls. Does anyone in this goddamn office know German? Silence. The kind of silence that screams discomfort. Lauren appeared again, her face flushed from so many calls. I've tried all our contacts, ma'am. The university has professors, but they're in class until 6. The consulates are closed to the public. The embassies, I don't care about the embassies. Sophia was losing control and she knew it. She could feel the stares of her employees, that mix of fear and secret satisfaction people feel when they see someone powerful start to crumble. This has to be translated in, she glanced at her watch again, 2 hours and 40 minutes. It was then that it happened. That moment she would remember for the rest of her life, that turning point where arrogance meets consequence. Frustration turned to rage, rage to cynicism, and cynicism into that terrible idea that desperate people have when they want to turn their humiliation into a spectacle. Sophia held the documents above her head, a forced, cruel smile curving her red-painted lips. You know what? Her voice had that theatrical quality she always used when she wanted to be the center of attention. I'll make a bet. I'll give my entire month's salary to whoever can translate this. The office erupted in nervous laughter. How much do you make again, boss? Robert asked, playing along. $25,000. Sophia spun around, displaying the documents like trophies. 25 grand for whoever can decipher this impossible German. More laughter. Amanda joked about learning German on an app. Paul suggested using Google Translate. Everyone joined in because it was more comfortable to laugh than to acknowledge the real desperation pulsing beneath her performance. For that price, I'll learn German in 5 minutes. Robert drew general applause. Sophia felt a wave of satisfaction. There she was, in control again. It didn't matter that she was desperate. It mattered that everyone saw her as generous, powerful, capable of gambling $25,000 on an impossible bet. It was exactly this kind of moment that made her feel superior. She could play with money that, for these people, represented years of work. So, Sophia spun again, looking for more laughter, more validation. No takers? No hidden geniuses here? And that's when the voice came from the hallway. Calm, firm, absolutely serious. Excuse me, Mrs. Hayes, I can help with the translation. Every head turned. And there stood Eleanor Miller, still in her blue cleaning uniform, the cart beside her, her gloved hands holding a cleaning cloth. For 3 eternal seconds, no one said a word. And then the office exploded in the biggest laugh those walls had ever witnessed. The sound was deafening. 20 people laughing at once, some slapping their desks, others doubling over in their chairs. Robert had to wipe tears from his eyes. Amanda clutched her stomach. Even Lauren, ever the professional, hid a smile behind her hand. The cleaning lady, Paul managed to say between laughs. The cleaning lady is a polyglot. Wait, wait, Robert held up his hands, calling for silence to make his joke. The woman who barely cleans right wants to solve the problem a professional translator couldn't. More laughter. Sophia joined in, throwing her head back, her shoulders shaking. It was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. This woman who spent 2 hours cleaning toilets thought she could, but then Sophia took a real look. Eleanor wasn't laughing. She didn't look embarrassed. There was nothing submissive in her posture. She just stood there, with a stillness that comes from absolute certainty. Her eyes, Sophia had never really looked at her eyes before, had that quality of someone who has seen too much of life to be rattled by laughter. "Mrs. Hayes," Eleanor repeated, her voice cutting through the noise like a sharp blade through silk. "I can translate those documents." Something in the firmness of that tone made the laughter die down, first a little, then more, until the office was silent again. But now it was a different kind of silence, expectant. Sophia wiped her eyes, still smiling, but now with a touch of uncertainty. "Are you serious? Completely? And how exactly?" Sophia drew out the words, her condescending tone returning. "Would a cleaning lady know German?" Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She took off her rubber gloves, one at a time, with deliberate movements. She folded them neatly and placed them on the cart. When she spoke again, there was something different in her voice. Not anger, not resentment, just the cold presentation of facts. "Because I was a university professor for 15 years. The air was sucked out of the room. Literally. It was as if everyone had held their breath at the same time. "A specialist in Germanic languages," Eleanor continued, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "German, Dutch, Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian. A master's in legal translation from Northwestern University. I worked for 8 years as an official translator for the German consulate." Amanda dropped her pen. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed like a thunderclap. Sophia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Why on earth would a university professor be working as a cleaner?" And there it was. The question that exposed everything. The broken economy, the destroyed dreams, the impossible choices people make when the world decides competence is worthless without connections. "Because," Eleanor answered, and now there was a hint of emotion in her voice, "I exposed a corruption scheme at the university, selling degrees and grades. I was fired for causing institutional instability. I was blacklisted in the academic world. My husband lost his job around the same time. My daughter has type 1 diabetes and needs imported insulin that costs $1,000 a month." Each sentence was a bombshell, and Eleanor delivered them with the precision of someone who had held those words in for too long. "So I took the first job that offered a steady contract and health insurance, because competence doesn't pay for insulin, but my dignity," she lifted her chin. "I still have my dignity." The silence was now absolute, awkward, the kind that makes people wish they were anywhere else. Sophia held the German documents with hands that were now visibly trembling. She looked at Eleanor, really looked, perhaps for the first time in 2 years. She saw the straight posture, the intelligence burning in those eyes, the entire life of struggle written in every line of her face. Sophia swallowed hard. "You can really translate this?" "I can." Eleanor held out her hand. "May I see the documents?" And Sophia, for the first time since inheriting that company and that obscene salary, for the first time since learning to treat people like disposable furniture, felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt shame, but pride was still stronger. It always was. "All right," Sophia said, her voice regaining a bit of its authority. "Go on then, genius. Impress me." And she handed the German documents into the hands of the woman she had despised for 2 whole years. Eleanor took the documents with the care an archaeologist handles precious artifacts. Her eyes scanned the first page, and even from a distance Sophia could see the immediate recognition, the familiarity of someone who doesn't just know a language but lives in it. "This is a—" Eleanor began, then stopped, her eyes widening slightly. "It's a what?" Sophia felt her heart race. The clock on the wall read 3:23 p.m. Eleanor looked up, and there was something new in her gaze, genuine surprise. "Mrs. Hayes, do you have family in Germany?" The question was so unexpected that Sophia almost laughed. "What? No, my father was American, my mother too." "Why?" "Because—" Eleanor turned her attention back to the document, her lips moving silently as she processed the text. "This is a notification of an international inheritance." The office erupted again, but this time it wasn't with laughter. It was with muffled exclamations, urgent whispers, the sound of chairs being pulled closer. "Inheritance?" Sophia felt the floor sway. "How much?" Eleanor didn't answer right away. She kept reading, turning pages, her eyes moving with speed and precision. Then finally she began to speak, and when she did, it was in German. "Sehr geehrte Frau Sophia Hayes." The words flowed from her lips with the ease of breathing, Wir schreiben Ihnen, um Ihnen über das Erbe zu informieren, das Ihnen von Ihrem Onkel väterlicherseits, Friedrich Heiß, hinterlassen wurde. It was impossible to fake it. Impossible to counterfeit that pronunciation, that natural fluency, that absolute control over the language. It was like watching a concert, every word a perfect note, every sentence a complete melody. The office was in absolute silence. Even Robert, always ready with a joke, was speechless. Eleanor stopped reading in German and began to translate, her voice now in English but retaining that professional official quality. Dear Mrs. Sophia Hayes, we are writing to inform you of the inheritance left to you by your paternal uncle, Friedrich Hayes, who passed away on December 25th of last year in Hamburg, Germany. Sophia felt her legs give way. She pulled over a chair and collapsed into it. I didn't know I had an uncle in Germany. Apparently you did, Eleanor continued, her eyes scanning the next lines. It says here that Friedrich Hayes emigrated to Germany in 1968, losing contact with his American family. He had no children or wife. You are listed as the sole living heir in the direct line of succession. And the amount? Amanda asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eleanor turned to the third page, found the specific section, and when she spoke, her voice was careful, measured, as if she were afraid the words would explode if said too quickly. $13 million in a bank account, plus 3 properties in Hamburg, with an estimated value of $9 million. No one moved. It was as if time had frozen, trapping everyone in that impossible moment where reality became too big to comprehend. $22 million, Sophia whispered. $22 million. Approximately, Lauren added automatically, her brain doing the math even as the reality of the number made her dizzy. Sophia looked at Eleanor, then at the documents, then back at Eleanor. But there's this deadline, right? 6 p.m. today. Yes. Eleanor pointed to a specific section. It's the deadline to send confirmation of receipt of the notification. If it passes, they will assume you are not interested or could not be located. After that, there are more complex legal procedures, and the inheritance could be contested or even revert to the German state. But it's still... Sophia looked at the clock desperately, 2.5 hours away. And you need a full translation, a response letter in German, and an express international shipment to Hamburg, Eleanor continued, her voice professional, as if she were giving a lecture. The documents need to be sent today. The last international pickup for FedEx is at 6 p.m. We have time, but not much. The entire office was now gathered around them, all pretense of work abandoned. They were witnessing something extraordinary, not just the revelation of the inheritance, but the transformation of Eleanor Miller from an invisible cleaning lady into an indispensable expert. Sophia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of that moment, its cosmic absurdity. For 2 years, she had treated this woman like dirt. She had pushed her cart, ignored her existence, made jokes about her incompetence, and now that same woman held the fate of $22 million in her hands. How much? Sophia forced the words out. How much do you want to do the full translation? Eleanor looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes, intelligent, tired, infinitely dignified, showed no triumph, no revenge. They showed only the calm certainty of someone who knows exactly what they are worth. You already made an offer, Eleanor said softly. Your monthly salary, $25,000. The office held its breath collectively. Sophia closed her eyes. $25,000. It was a lot of money, but losing $22 million? Losing it all because she was too arrogant to recognize competence when it was right in front of her. When she opened her eyes again, there was something different in them. It wasn't humility, not yet, but it was recognition. Acceptance, the first step on a journey she didn't yet know she was beginning. You have a deal. 3:38 p.m. The digital clock on the wall blinked relentlessly, each second a reminder that time and pride are two luxuries that rarely go together. Lauren, Sophia's voice had lost all its haughtiness, replaced by a raw urgency. Clear the conference room. Now. No one in, no one out, no one disturbs. Lauren was already moving before she finished the sentence. 6 years working there had taught her to act fast when needed. I need a computer, Eleanor said, her mind already organizing the work. With Word, internet access, and someone who knows how to arrange an international express shipment. My personal laptop is in there, Sophia pointed to her office. Latest version of everything. Lauren always handles our international shipping. I will need absolute silence. Eleanor took the documents, arranging them in order of importance. 2 hours and 20 minutes may seem like a lot, but legal translation isn't just changing words from one language to another. It's interpreting legal terms, understanding cultural context, ensuring every comma is in the right place. For the first time, Sophia was truly listening, not just hearing the words but absorbing what they meant. This was the voice of an expert, of someone who had mastered something she could never buy with money. "What do you need from me?" Sophia asked, and the sentence sounded strange in her own mouth. How many times in her life had she asked someone what they needed from her? "Stay available. I'll have questions about family details." Eleanor was already moving toward the conference room. "And pray the internet doesn't go down." The office transformed. Robert closed all the doors with exaggerated care. Paula answered the phone in whispers. Amanda brewed fresh coffee. Even the air conditioning seemed to be running more quietly. Inside the conference room, Eleanor sat at the head of the glass table, Sophia's laptop open before her, the German documents spread around her in meticulous order. She took down her simple bun, letting her brown hair fall to her shoulders, then tied it back again, tighter this time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, that breath before the dive, and then she began. Outside, through the glass wall, the entire office watched, fascinated. It was like watching a surgeon perform a delicate operation, every movement precise, every decision critical. Sophia couldn't stop pacing. 12 steps to the window, turn, 12 steps to reception, turn again. Her hands trembled slightly, and she shoved them into her suit pockets to hide her nervousness. "How long has she worked here?" Robert asked in a low voice, still processing. 2 years, Lauren answered, and there was guilt in her voice. 2 years, and I never asked. How many times did we complain about the cleaning? Amanda added, her eyes fixed on Eleanor through the glass. How many times did we treat her like she was invisible? The weight of those words hung in the air. It wasn't just Sophia who had failed. They all had. Everyone who had walked past Eleanor for the last 2 years without truly seeing who she was. Everyone who had allowed her to remain invisible because it was more comfortable not to see. 4 p.m. Eleanor had completed the translation of the first document. Her posture was perfect, back straight, eyes focused. There were no coffees beside her, no breaks to stretch. It was pure focus, a professionalism born from years of experience. "She's doing it as if," Paula began. "As if she's done it 1,000 times before," Lauren finished, "because she probably has." 4:40 p.m. Eleanor stood up for the first time, crossed the room, and opened the door. 20 pairs of eyes stared at her. "Mrs. Hayes, I need to confirm a few details." Sophia practically ran to the conference room. "What do you need?" "Your father's full name and his date of birth." Sophia provided the information, watching Eleanor jot it down on a separate sheet with perfect, almost calligraphic handwriting. "Anything else?" "Not for now. I'll finish the translation and then prepare the response letter." 5:15 p.m., 45 minutes to go. The office was in suspense. Work was completely abandoned, reports forgotten, calls ignored. Everyone was there, witnessing this. 5:37 p.m. The door opened. Eleanor walked out, holding a folder of documents organized with surgical meticulousness. Her face was calm, but there was sweat on her brow, and her breathing was slightly quickened. "It's done," she announced, and her voice echoed in the silence like a bell. Sophia crossed the office in 4 strides. She took the folder, opened it, and her eyes scanned the pages. Even without knowing German, she could see the perfection. Every paragraph aligned, every technical term underlined with explanations in footnotes, even a glossary of legal terms at the end. "This is..." Sophia was at a loss for words. "Professional work," Eleanor said simply. "It's how I've always done it." Lauren was already on the phone. "FedEx is waiting. If we leave now, we'll make it before 6. Sophia didn't think. She grabbed the folder and ran. Literally ran, her Louboutin heels clattering on the marble, the impeccable suit wrinkling as she bolted for the door. Lauren ran after her, car keys already in hand, and the entire office, including Eleanor, remained silent, watching through the windows as Sophia's grey Mercedes disappeared into the chaotic Chicago traffic, carrying $22 million of hope. 5:43 p.m. The game was still on. 6:23 p.m. Sophia burst into the office like a hurricane, her hair disheveled, her suit wrinkled, sweat staining the expensive silk. But there was something different in her eyes, a wild glint, part relief, part pure adrenaline. "I made it!" she almost shouted, hands on her knees as she tried to catch her breath. 3 minutes before they closed, 3 damn minutes. The office erupted in applause. Robert whistled. Paula let out a cry of joy. It was genuine. Everyone had become emotionally invested in this race against time. Everyone felt the victory as if it were their own. Everyone except Eleanor, who remained standing by her workstation, the cleaning cart still there, a silent witness to her dual identity. Sophia straightened up, running her hands through her hair in a futile attempt to regain her composure. Her eyes met Eleanor's across the office, and for an eternal moment, time seemed to freeze. $22 million. The phrase echoed in her mind like a mantra. $22 million that would have been lost, vanished into the German bureaucratic ether, if not for the woman she had treated like dirt for 2 years. Sophia crossed the office with slow, deliberate steps. The room fell silent again, everyone sensing that something important was about to happen. She stopped less than a yard from Eleanor, and for the first time she truly saw. She saw the fine lines around her eyes, not from age but from worry. She saw the calloused hands, not from manual labor, but from the daily struggle for survival. She saw the straight posture, the unshakable dignity of someone who never lost sight of who she really was, even when the world insisted she be invisible. Sophia began, and the word came out hoarse. I need to apologize to you. The silence in the office was so profound, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant tick of a clock, the collective breath of 20 people holding it in. I treated you badly, Sophia continued, forcing the words out as if they were stones. I treated you like you were nothing, like you didn't matter. For 2 whole years. Eleanor said nothing, just held that steady gaze, waiting. I didn't know your story. Sophia felt a hotness behind her eyes. Tears. When was the last time she'd cried? But that's no excuse. Even if you were just a cleaner. She made air quotes, and the word itself sounded rotten in her mouth. Even then, you deserved respect. Everyone does. Yes, Eleanor said softly. Everyone does. Sophia swallowed hard. Here she was, a millionaire CEO who was about to become even richer, and she felt small, tiny. As if all the money in the world couldn't buy what this woman had. Character. $25,000, Sophia said abruptly. I promised you. I'll deposit it tomorrow morning. But, she took a deep breath, but that's not enough. Mrs. Hayes, I want to offer you a job. A real one. The words came out in a rush now, tumbling over each other. Translation consultant. $10,000 a month, plus benefits. A premium health plan that will cover your daughter's insulin, flexible hours, remote work when you need it. You're too good to be wasted here cleaning floors. Eleanor blinked, and for the first time since it all began, her composure wavered. I need to think about it. Talk to my husband. Of course. Obviously. Sophia waved her hands. No pressure. But the offer stands. It was then that Robert stood up, crossing the office to stand in front of Eleanor. I need to apologize too, he said, his voice heavy. I made jokes. I laughed. I was part of it. Me too, Amanda joined them. I never asked how you were. I never treated you the way I should have. One by one, the employees came forward, some apologizing verbally, others just with ashamed looks. Paula was crying openly. Lauren stood with her arms crossed, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Eleanor looked around at all these people who for 2 years had passed her as if she were invisible and were now here, truly seeing her for the first time. Part of her wanted to reject it, to say it was too late, that apologies couldn't erase 2 years of humiliation. But the bigger part, the part that had survived university corruption, professional blacklisting and sleepless nights worrying about her daughter, that part knew that anger was a luxury she couldn't afford to carry. I accept your apologies, she said finally. We all make judgments. The point is what we do when we find out we were wrong. Sophia looked at the cleaning cart, then back at Eleanor. You can go home for today, she said. And you don't ever have to come back in that uniform. Eleanor nodded slowly, took her small purse from a hook on the wall, and turned to leave. At the door she stopped and looked back one last time. Mrs. Hayes? Yes? That inheritance. $22 million. Don't let it change who you can become from this moment on. And then she was gone, leaving behind an office of people changed forever and a CEO who for the first time in her life was beginning to understand the true meaning of wealth. The March sun flooded the office when Eleanor arrived the next morning, but this time there was no cleaning cart, no light blue uniform. She wore a simple but elegant pantsuit, black slacks and a white blouse that had been stored in her closet for 2 years, waiting for a day she had begun to think would never come. The effect was seismic. Paula at reception stood up automatically. Robert stopped mid-hallway, his mouth agape. Amanda dropped her coffee, the mug shattering on the floor in 1,000 pieces. No one moved to clean up. "Good morning," Eleanor said naturally, as if this transformation were the most normal thing in the world. Lauren was the first to recover. "Eleanor, the conference room is free. I spoke with Sophia last night. She wants to discuss the terms of the contract." It was surreal. 24 hours ago, she was being pushed aside with a cleaning cart. Now she was being led to the main conference room like an executive. Sophia was already there, sitting at the head of the table. But there was something different. It was no longer that imperial posture, that chin held high by someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. There was humility. Still awkward, still struggling to emerge from under layers of privilege and arrogance. But it was there. "Thank you for coming," Sophia began, pushing a folder across the table. "This is the contract. Lauren helped prepare it. 8,000 a month premium health insurance, flexible hours. But there are some conditions." The phone rang, cutting the sentence short. Sophia frowned, picked up the receiver. "Hello?" Eleanor watched the color drain from the CEO's face like water down a drain. Sophia's fingers gripped the phone so tightly, her knuckles turned white. "Ja, ich verstehe," Sophia said automatically, then stopped herself, realizing what she'd done. Wait, I don't—" "Eleanor," she held out the phone in desperation. "It's from Hamburg. They're speaking German, and I don't understand a word." Eleanor took the receiver, switching to German with the ease of someone changing channels. "Guten Morgen. Hier spricht Eleanor Miller." Ja, ich bin die Übersetzerin." "Was?" Her expression changed. "Nein, das kann nicht sein." Sophia watched, trying to decipher what was happening from Eleanor's body language, the way her brows furrowed, how she sat up straighter, the tone her voice took. Whatever it wasn't good news. 5 minutes of rapid German conversation, then Eleanor slowly hung up. "What is it?" Sophia asked, her voice a whisper. "New documents have arrived from Hamburg. There are complications." "What kind of complications?" Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. "The inheritance is being contested. 3 people have come forward claiming rights. 2 distant cousins and a woman who says she lived with Friedrich for 10 years. They have lawyers and a hearing has been scheduled." "A hearing?" The panic was returning to Sophia's voice. "Like a trial?" "Basically, German inheritance law allows for challenges up to 6 months after the death. Friedrich passed away in December. We're in March. They're still within the window." Eleanor opened her eyes and there was determination in them. "But so are we. The hearing is in 3 days." 3 days? Sophia shot up, her chair scraping against the floor. "What now? I don't know anything about German law. I don't speak the language. I barely know where Hamburg is on a map." "Then," Eleanor said calmly, folding her hands on the table, "you won't be going alone." The silent office outside the conference room seemed to be holding its breath. Through the glass walls, everyone could see the tense conversation, even without hearing the words. Sophia processed slowly. "You're saying you would go with me? To Germany?" "Not just go. I need to go. You have no chance without someone who knows the German legal system, who speaks the language, who understands the cultural nuances." Eleanor leaned forward. "But I won't go for free." "How much?" Eleanor held her gaze. 5% of the recovered inheritance. Sophia did the mental math quickly. 5% of $22 million, $1,100,000. "That's," she started. "Fair," Eleanor finished. "It's specialized international consulting, simultaneous translation, knowledge of German inheritance law, and frankly, it's what will make the difference between you winning or losing everything. Think of it as an investment, not an expense." Sophia looked at this woman sitting across from her in simple clothes and infinite dignity, and something clicked in her brain. It wasn't just about the money. It was about acknowledging that some things can't be bought, but can be earned through respect and recognition. "You have a deal," Sophia said, extending her hand. Eleanor shook it, firm and confident. "Then we start now. We need passports, tickets, a hotel, and I need to call some contacts in Hamburg. I have a lawyer friend there who will be crucial." "Lauren!" Sophia threw open the door, shouting into the office. "Get everyone together. We're going to Germany." The office erupted into frantic motion. Robert bolted for the travel agency. Amanda started pulling financial reports. Paula called the consulate for visa information. And Eleanor, sitting in that conference room where 24 hours earlier She had translated documents that would change everything, allowed herself a small smile. The journey was just beginning, and this time she wasn't invisible. This time she was essential. The office transformed into a military operation over the next 24 hours. Papers flew, phones rang incessantly. The smell of strong coffee permeated the entire floor. Sophia had called everyone to an emergency meeting, and now they worked like a well-oiled machine. Ironic, considering that 2 days ago they barely communicated beyond what was professionally necessary. Eleanor had been on the phone for 40 minutes, switching between German and English with an ease that still fascinated everyone. Ja, Klaus, genau. Nein, 3 Kläger. Ja, das habe ich auch gedacht. Who's Klaus? Robert whispered to Amanda. A lawyer friend of hers in Hamburg, Lauren answered, having been present during the initial preparations. Apparently one of the best specialists in German inheritance law. She worked with him when she was at the consulate. Robert shook his head, still processing. We've worked with her for 2 years and knew none of this. Because we never asked, Amanda said softly, and the weight of guilt hung over them both. Eleanor hung up the phone and turned to Sophia. Klaus will meet us at the airport. He's already obtained copies of the documents the claimants have filed. We have 2 cousins alleging a verbal promise of inheritance, and a woman, Helga Bauer, who claims to have been Friedrich's partner for 10 years. But the will, Sophia began. The will is clear, Eleanor confirmed. But in Germany, claimants can allege undue influence, lack of mental capacity of the deceased, or even forgery. They'll try anything. That's why we need to be prepared. Prepared how? Eleanor picked up a folder, opening it on the table. First, we need all the family documentation you have. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, old photos if there are any. Anything that proves your lineage. Lauren, Sophia called out, call my mother. She needs to bring all the old documents she saved from my father, everything. Second, Eleanor continued, I need you to understand how the German judicial system works. It's very different from the American one. It's more formal, more rigid. Judges don't like emotional displays. They want facts, documentation, logic. You're going to have to control your temper. Sophia opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Part of her wanted to say she always controlled her temper, but the last 48 hours had forced her to face uncomfortable truths about herself. She didn't control it. She exploded. She yelled. She used her position to intimidate. I'll try, she said, and the words sounded honest. Third, Eleanor checked her notes. Klaus has managed to schedule a meeting with the lawyer administering the estate, Dr. Hans Weber. He's neutral in the case, but he might give us insights into the claimants and their allegations. When's the flight? Paula asked from the doorway, where she was following everything with wide eyes. Tomorrow night, Lauren answered. 10 p.m. via Frankfurt. We arrive in Hamburg the following day at 2 p.m. local time. The hearing is the day after we arrive? Amanda checked the calendar. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. That's why we need to use every minute. We'll land, go straight to the hotel, then to Klaus's office. He's going to prep Sophia for the hearing. Sophia felt her head spin. Germany. She had never even been outside the US. Her entire world had been Chicago, occasionally New York for meetings. And now she was going to another continent to fight for an inheritance from an uncle she never knew existed. Can I ask a question? Robert raised his hand timidly. Of course, Eleanor replied. Why are you doing this? I mean, he blushed. No offense, but after how you were treated here, why help so much? Eleanor was silent for a moment, her eyes distant. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of 2 years of struggle, of sleepless nights, of dignity maintained against all odds. Because I need to believe that competence still matters. That effort is still worth something. That all those nights studying, all those years specializing, all that work I did, that it wasn't for nothing. She looked directly at Sophia. And because, despite everything, I still believe that people can change. That admitting your own mistakes is worth more than never making any. The office fell silent. It was the kind of raw honesty that strips away all pretense, that forces people to face uncomfortable truths. Sophia swallowed hard. I will change, she said, and for the first time in her life she truly meant it. I promise. Then, Eleanor closed the folder with finality. We have work to do. Sophia, you're with me. We're going to review the entire German legal process. Robert, Amanda, you're in charge of keeping the company running while we're away. Lauren, finish the travel arrangements. Everyone began to disperse, moving with renewed purpose. But before leaving, Sophia paused, looking back. Eleanor? Yes? Thank you for not giving up. On me. On everything. Eleanor smiled, a weary but genuine smile. I haven't given up yet, but you're going to have to work for it. Germans have no patience for arrogance. Then, Sophia smiled back, it's a good thing I have 24 hours to practice humility. 24 hours, Eleanor repeated, and a lifetime after that. The flight was long, turbulent, filled with that particular discomfort that comes from being trapped in a metal can at 30,000 feet. Sophia hadn't slept, part anxiety, part the irrational fear that if she closed her eyes, she'd wake up and it would all be a bizarre dream. The inheritance, Eleanor's transformation, her own forced journey toward human decency. But when the plane touched down on German soil at 1:46 p.m., the reality was undeniable. The March cold in Hamburg cut to the bone, different from the humid warmth of Chicago. The airport was efficient, clean, quiet. Everything ran with that German precision Eleanor had tried to describe, but that had to be experienced to be understood. Bleiben Sie bitte rechts stehen, the automated voice on the airport train echoed. Eleanor translated automatically. Please stand to the right. Sophia watched everything with wide eyes. The people here moved differently, spoke differently. And she, who had always been the most important person in any room in Chicago, was just another lost tourist here. There, Eleanor pointed. Klaus. The man waiting in the arrivals area was in his late 50s, with perfectly cut grey hair, thin-framed glasses, and an impeccable grey overcoat. When he saw Eleanor, his entire face lit up. Eleanor! He hugged her warmly, exchanging quick words in German that Sophia couldn't follow. Then he turned to her, and the smile remained but became more formal, more measured. Frau Hayes, welcome to Hamburg. I am Klaus Schmidt. They shook hands. His grip was firm, professional, judgmental. Sophia felt she was being sized up, every aspect of her catalogued and analyzed. Thank you for having us, she managed to say. From what Eleanor has told me, Klaus replied in English with a heavy but understandable accent, you have a difficult case. Let's go to the car. We'll talk on the way. Klaus's black Mercedes was silent and warm, a welcome relief from the cold outside. As they navigated the streets of Hamburg, Klaus spoke, switching between German with Eleanor and English with Sophia. The claimants are smart, he explained, especially the woman, Helga Bauer. She's hired one of the most aggressive lawyers in Hamburg. They will question everything. Your identity, your intent, even the validity of the last will. But we have documentation, Sophia protested. Yes, Klaus nodded. But they will argue that you never maintained contact with Friedrich, that you didn't even know he existed until the inheritance appeared. They will paint you as an opportunist who only showed up for the money. Sophia's stomach sank. And I am. The silence that followed was heavy. Klaus glanced at her in the rearview mirror, one eyebrow raised. Eleanor turned her head slowly. I didn't even know I had this uncle, Sophia continued, the words tumbling out in an honest stream that surprised her. I never looked for him, never cared. And when I found out about the inheritance, all I saw were numbers, $22 million. I didn't see a human being, I didn't see family history. I saw money. At least you're honest, Klaus said after a moment. I'm trying to be, Sophia replied. For the first time in my life, I'm trying. Klaus nodded slowly. That might actually help. German judges value honesty. If you are authentic in the hearing, admit what is true, that counts. The hotel was in the historic center, a 19th century building converted into a boutique hotel. Rooms with high ceilings, dark wood furniture, an old-world elegance that made Sophia feel small. Rest, Klaus said in the lobby. I have some documents to prepare. We'll meet at 6 for dinner. There is much to discuss. Eleanor and Sophia went to their respective rooms. Sophia had insisted on paying for separate rooms, a small attempt to show respect. When she was finally alone, Sophia threw herself on the bed, staring at the ornate ceiling. $22 million. The phrase echoed in her mind. But now, for the first time, another question was forming, one she had never allowed herself to consider before. What if she lost? What if, despite everything, the judge decided the claimants had more right? And more importantly, who would she be then? Without the inheritance, without the new money, just herself? The answer was terrifying, because for the first time, Sophia Hayes was beginning to suspect that money had never been what truly mattered. But old habits die hard, and the next 24 hours would tell if she had changed enough, or if it was too late. The Hamburg courthouse was a building that breathed history and authority. Built in the neoclassical style in the late 19th century, its Corinthian columns rose like unforgiving guardians of justice. Sophia climbed the marble steps with legs that felt like lead, each step echoing with finality. "Breathe," Eleanor murmured beside her. "And remember, let me do most of the talking. Only answer when you're asked directly." Sophia nodded, her throat too dry for words. She wore her best suit, the Chanel she saved for special occasions, but here, in this temple of German law, it felt garish, too flashy. Around her, lawyers in discreet suits moved with the confidence of those who know every corridor, every room, every judge. The courtroom was smaller than Sophia had imagined, but far more intimidating. Dark wood paneling, a discreet crucifix above the judge's chair, hard benches that forced perfect posture. Said smelled of old books, furniture polish and centuries of judgments. "There," Klaus indicated with a discreet nod, "the claimants." Sophia looked. Two middle-aged men, with heavy faces and bitter expressions, sat on the left with their lawyer, a thin man with glasses who riffled through papers with long fingers. Martin and Stefan Koch, the cousins claiming a verbal promise. And then there was her. Helga Bauer was not what Sophia had expected. In her 50s, a blonde with the kind of faded beauty that suggests she was once stunning, she wore a simple black dress and held a white handkerchief in her hands. She looked fragile, vulnerable, a grieving widow. "She's good," Eleanor whispered. "Look how she's positioned. Perfect angle for the judge to see her best. She's already crying before it even starts." Dr. Hans Weber, the lawyer responsible for administering the estate, sat at a separate table, neutral. His eyes, however, followed every movement with professional interest. "Alle aufstehen," a voice announced, and everyone stood. Judge Müller entered. Late 60s, a perfectly trimmed grey beard, reading glasses hanging from a chain. His eyes were the kind of glacial blue that seemed to see through lies. He sat and everyone followed suit. For a long moment, the judge just observed the room, letting the silence do its intimidating work. "Wir beginnen," he said finally. "We begin." Klaus stood, beginning in fluent German. Eleanor translated in whispers for Sophia, but even without understanding every word, Sophia could follow the flow. Klaus presenting the case, establishing the legitimacy of the last will, providing the family tree. The cousin's lawyer countered. His voice was sharp, accusatory. Eleanor translated, "He's claiming the will was made when Friedrich was under heavy medication, that he wasn't of sound mind." Dr. Weber intervened, presenting medical records. His voice was calm, factual. "He's saying Friedrich was perfectly lucid when he made the will. 3 doctors attest to it." Then it was Helga's turn. When she began to speak, her voice was small, broken, perfect in its fragility. She told a story of love and devotion, 10 years caring for Friedrich, sacrificing her own life, being promised marriage but always putting it off because he was sick, needed care. "It's all lies," Eleanor whispered. "Klaus has evidence." But as Helga spoke, Sophia watched the judge's face. He wasn't convinced, but he was listening. That was more than she'd hoped for. Klaus waited for Helga to finish before standing again, and when he spoke, his voice had the quality of a blade cutting through lies. He presented affidavits. 3 neighbors, all swearing that Helga only appeared in the last 6 months of Friedrich's life, not 10 years. 6 months. "She cared for him," Klaus continued, and Eleanor translated, "but only when it became clear he was dying. She was a palliative care nurse. She was hired, not his partner." Helga's face flushed. Her lawyer protested vehemently, but the damage was done. The judge made notes, his expression unreadable. The cousins tried their luck. They presented witnesses claiming Friedrich had verbally promised to split the properties with them. But the dates didn't add up. One witness said 2 years ago, another 3, the third last year. Klaus methodically destroyed each testimony, pointing out contradictions, questioning memories, exposing inconsistencies. But then came the question Sophia had been dreading. The judge turned to her, his ice-blue eyes fixed, and spoke directly in English. "Miss Hayes, will you please stand?" Sophia stood, her legs trembling. "Did you know your Uncle Friedrich?" "No, sir." Her voice came out steady, surprising even herself. "Did you know he existed?" "Not until I received the inheritance documents." The judge leaned forward. "And yet, you are here to claim $22 million from a man you never met." The silence in the room was absolute. Sophia could feel every eye on her, Klaus tense, Eleanor ready to intervene, the claimants practically savoring her imminent downfall. And Sophia made the most important decision of her life. She told the truth. "Yes," she answered. "Initially, I only saw the money. I didn't see a human being, I didn't see history, I didn't see family. I saw $22 million. A murmur went through the room. The judge raised an eyebrow. But, Sophia continued, the words flowing now, this journey has taught me something. It's taught me that I had spent years treating people as if they didn't matter, as if worth was measured in money, in position, in power. She glanced at Eleanor. And the person who saved me, who made all this possible, was someone I treated as invisible for 2 years. Where is this going, Miss Hayes? The judge asked, but there was something different in his voice now. Curiosity, perhaps. Friedrich wrote in his will that he wanted to reconnect with his American family, that he regretted losing contact. I can't change his past, but I can honor his intent. Not just by taking the money, but by being the kind of person who deserves this second chance. Sophia took a deep breath. If you decide I don't deserve this inheritance, I will accept it. Because for the first time in my life, I understand that some things are more important than money. The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was contemplative. Judge Muller studied Sophia for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was there. 1 hour recess, he announced, banging his gavel. We reconvene at 3. And as everyone stood, Eleanor put a hand on Sophia's arm. You were perfect, she whispered. Sophia took a deep breath. I just told the truth. I know, Eleanor smiled. Sometimes that's all we need to do. The hour-long recess felt like decades. Sophia couldn't eat any of the coffee cake Klaus bought, her stomach twisting into ever tighter knots. They waited in a small room reserved for lawyers, the silence weighing like liquid lead. You did well, Klaus repeated for the 3rd time, trying to reassure her. Judge Müller has a reputation for being tough but fair. He values honesty above all else. What if it's not enough? Sophia asked, her voice small. Then at least you'll have a clear conscience, Eleanor answered, and there was something profound in those words. And that, believe me, is worth more than you can imagine. At 3 p.m. sharp, everyone was back in the room. The air felt thicker now, charged with anticipation and tension. The claimants were restless. Helga twisted her white handkerchief until it nearly tore. The cousins whispered furiously with their lawyer. Judge Müller entered, and this time there was a thick folder under his arm. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and began without preamble. After reviewing all the documentation, he said in English, clearly for Sophia's benefit, and considering all the testimonies, I have reached several conclusions. Sophia gripped Eleanor's hand under the table. Her fingers were ice-cold. First, the judge continued, regarding the cousins Martin and Stefan Koch, the witnesses presented contradict each other on crucial dates. More importantly, no written document supports their claims. In German law, verbal promises of inheritance are not binding without substantial documentary evidence. The cousins looked at each other, disappointment clear on their faces. Therefore, the judge banged the gavel once, the claim of Messrs. Koch is rejected. Klaus pumped a fist in silent victory. 1 claimant down. Second, the judge turned to Helga. Frau Bauer, your testimonies regarding your relationship with the deceased are problematic. Helga's lawyer stood up, starting to protest, but the judge raised a hand. The neighbors' affidavits are consistent and corroborated by payment records from the Palliative Care Agency. Frau Bauer was hired as a nurse 6 months prior to Friedrich Hayes's passing. Any personal relationship she may have developed during that time does not constitute a legal basis to challenge a clear and specific will. Helga began to sob loudly, but the judge remained unmoved. Therefore, the claim of Frau Bauer is also rejected. 2 claimants down. Sophia felt her heart pound, hope beginning to blossom in her chest like spring after a long winter. Now the judge turned to her and his voice softened. Miss Hayes. Sophia forced herself to hold his gaze, even though her legs were shaking so hard she doubted she could stand. Your honesty today was refreshing. In a courtroom where everyone tries to present the best version of themselves, you admitted your flaws, your imperfect motivations, your journey of transformation. He shuffled the papers in front of him. More importantly, the documentation presented by Dr. Schmidt is impeccable. DNA test confirming kinship, verified family tree, and we also have the last will of Friedrich Hayes, made 3 months before his death, in full command of his mental faculties, specifically leaving everything to my only living niece in America. The judge paused, letting the suspense build. Friedrich wrote in his will, and I have the original letter here, about his regret at losing contact with his brother Michael, about his desire to reconnect through you, even if posthumously. The judge looked at Sophia over his glasses. He didn't know you, Miss Hayes, but he wanted to. He wanted to make amends. He wanted you to have the chance at the life he built. Tears began to roll down Sophia's face. She didn't even try to hide them. Therefore, Judge Muller banged the gavel one last time, the sound echoing like thunder. I declare that the estate of Friedrich Hayes legally belongs to his niece, Sophia Hayes, as stipulated in his last will and testament. All challenges are rejected. The $22 million in financial assets and the 3 properties in Hamburg are officially transferred to Miss Hayes. The room erupted. Helga's lawyer protested vehemently, but the judge ignored him. Klaus hugged Eleanor, both laughing. Dr. Weber gave a professional nod of approval, and Sophia just stood there, letting the reality slowly sink in. She had won $22 million. But as she looked at Eleanor, who was beaming with genuine joy for her, Sophia realized something she never expected to feel. The money didn't matter as much as she thought it would. What mattered was that she had earned it, not through birthright or privilege, but by finally learning how to be human. The Hamburg sky was surprisingly blue when they left the courthouse, as if the universe finally agreed that something good had happened. Sophia blinked against the sunlight, still half dazed, her ears ringing with the echoes of the judge's gavel. $22 million. The words didn't feel real, even repeated 1,000 times in her head. It was like trying to hold fog. The harder she squeezed, the more it slipped through the fingers of her understanding. You'll need to sign some documents. Dr. Weber appeared beside them, a leather briefcase under his arm. Official transfer, tax matters, various formalities. But the process is started. In approximately 6 weeks, the funds will be available. 6 weeks, Sophia repeated, stunned. That's fast for Germany, Klaus laughed. Usually it would take months. But since there are no more challenges and everything is in order, he shrugged. German efficiency. They went to a cafe near the courthouse, a small place with worn wooden tables and a smell of freshly ground coffee that reminded Sophia of Chicago, of home, of a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. I need to pay you, Sophia said abruptly, looking at Eleanor across the table. 5%. $1,100,000. Eleanor took a sip of her coffee, her face serene. When the funds are available, there's no rush. There is a rush, Sophia insisted. You saved all of this. Without you, I would have lost it. Not just the money, but... She paused, searching for words that would do justice to what she felt. But the chance to be someone better. You saved yourself, Eleanor corrected gently. I just translated some words. You chose to be honest. You chose to change, that was all you. Klaus watched the exchange with obvious interest. You two, he said thoughtfully, have an interesting dynamic. How did you come to work together? There was an awkward silence. Sophia looked down at her coffee, the weight of shame still fresh. I treated her like dirt for 2 years, Sophia said finally, forcing the words out. She was a cleaner in my office. I pushed her, ignored her, mocked her. And then I desperately needed someone who spoke German, and I found out there was a university professor hidden right under my nose. Klaus raised both eyebrows. That is... unexpected. It's humiliating, Sophia corrected. It's the most humiliating thing I've ever experienced, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Why? Klaus asked, genuinely curious. Sophia looked at Eleanor, at this woman who had every right to have let her sink, who could have turned her back and watched her lose everything, but she hadn't. She had stayed. She had helped. She had taught. Because, Sophia took a deep breath, it showed me I was living all wrong. That success isn't how much money you have, but how you treat people. That dignity doesn't come from position, but from character. Eleanor placed her hand over Sophia's on the table. And you're learning, that's what matters. I'm going to do things differently, Sophia promised. When we get back, I'm changing everything. The way I run the company, the way I treat employees, the way I live my life. I'm going to make it count, make Friedrich proud wherever he is. Then, Klaus raised his cup, a toast to unexpected inheritances, second chances, and unlikely transformations. They toasted, the delicate sound of porcelain clinking. Later, walking back to the hotel through the historic streets of Hamburg, Sophia looked around as if seeing the city for the first time. There was beauty here, in the old buildings, the canals, the bridges. But more than that, there was history, lives lived, choices made, consequences faced. $22 million, she said out loud, testing the words. It's a lot of money. It is, Eleanor agreed. But you know what I realized today in the courtroom? What? That the most valuable thing I won wasn't the 22 million. Sophia stopped, turning to face Eleanor. It was understanding that I needed you far more than you ever needed me. And that this, she gestured between them, this power dynamic I thought I had, it was all an illusion. Eleanor smiled, a sad, wise smile. Real power doesn't come from where you are in the hierarchy. It comes from what you know, what you can do, and who you are when no one is watching. And I was no one, Sophia admitted. I was just a rich woman being cruel because I could, because it was allowed, because no one stopped me. But now you've stopped yourself, Eleanor pointed out. And that's worth more than any inheritance. They continued walking, two souls in a city of millions, but connected by an unlikely journey that had transformed them both in ways neither had anticipated. And somewhere perhaps Friedrich Hayes was smiling. His inheritance had done exactly what he'd hoped, reconnected his family, not just through money, but through lessons of worth, respect, and redemption. Epilogue. 3 months later, the office in Chicago was unrecognizable. Not physically. The furniture was the same. The marble floor still reflected everything with merciless clarity. The panoramic windows still offered a stunning view of the skyscrapers. But everything else had changed in ways that couldn't be measured or touched. Sophia now arrived at 9, not 10. She greeted every employee by name. The cleaning cart, now pushed by John, a retired gentleman who needed to supplement his income, was never pushed, always respectfully skirted. The company had grown exponentially. The $22 million had been invested wisely. Expansion into European markets, strategic partnerships, technological innovation. But the most impressive growth wasn't in the numbers. It was in the people. Meeting in 5, Lauren announced, appearing at the door. She was the administrative manager now, salary tripled, with real responsibilities. Everyone's in the main room. Sophia nodded, closing her laptop. She stood, smoothing her blazer, still designer but chosen for quality, not to flaunt a label. Small changes that reflected larger transformations. The main conference room was full. Not just executives but representatives from every department. Robert from sales, Amanda from finance, Paula from reception. And there, at the opposite head of the table, sat Eleanor. Eleanor Miller, now Director of International Relations, with a salary of $15,000 a month, plus 5% of the profits from international contracts. She wore elegant suits now, her hair down in professional waves, an air of competence that had always been there but finally had room to shine. "Thank you for coming," Sophia began, standing up. "I want to make a few announcements." The office fell into expectant silence. "First," Sophia looked at Eleanor, "I want to publicly thank, once again, the person who made all of this possible. Without Eleanor, I would not only have lost the inheritance, I would have lost something far more important, my humanity." Polite applause. Eleanor nodded, smiling modestly. "Second," Sophia continued, "starting today, 15% of all company profits will be distributed equally among all employees, regardless of title or position. Director or cleaner, everyone who works with honesty and dedication shares in the success." The silence erupted into cheers. Robert jumped out of his chair, hugging Amanda. Paula cried openly. Even Lauren, always composed, dabbed at the corners of her eyes. "And third," Sophia raised her voice over the noise, waiting for silence to return, "I am creating a scholarship fund for the children and family members of all employees. No one will ever have to stop their education for lack of money again." It was chaos. People laughing, crying, hugging. The room vibrated with genuine joy, the kind that can't be manufactured or bought. Sophia watched it all and felt something warm and wet roll down her cheek. A tear. When was the last time she'd cried with joy? Cried for someone other than herself? After everyone had calmed down, Eleanor stood, lightly tapping her glass to get attention. "I also have an announcement," she said, her voice clear and firm. "My daughter Sophie was just accepted into the pre-med program at Northwestern with a full scholarship." The room erupted again. Sophie was there. Sophia had insisted on inviting her to the meeting. A 16-year-old girl, tall, intelligent, with the same determined eyes as her mother. She blushed under the attention but stood tall, proud. "She starts in the fall," Eleanor continued, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "And she's going to be the first doctor in our family. My father was a construction worker, my mother a housekeeper, and now my daughter is going to save lives." Sophia came over, standing beside Eleanor. "You taught me," she said, looking out at the crowded room. that true success isn't how much you accumulate, it's how much you lift others up, how many lives you touch, the legacy you leave. Friedrich Hayes, Eleanor added, never met me, but through his inheritance, he changed not only Sophia's life but all of ours here. Because he forced an arrogant CEO, she smiled to soften the words, to look beyond herself and see the value in every person. And forced a professor, Sophia completed, to step out of the shadows and reclaim her place in the world. They hugged, and the embrace wasn't awkward or forced. It was genuine. Two women from completely different worlds, brought together by an unlikely journey that transformed them both. Later, after everyone had left and the office was quiet under the starry Chicago sky, Sophia remained at the window, looking out at the city. I'll give you my salary if you can translate this. The words echoed in her memory, but now they carried a completely different meaning. They were no longer a taunting arrogance, but the turning point, the moment where her life split into before and after. Before, she was rich but empty, powerful but insignificant. She had everything but was worth nothing. After, she had real wealth, not just in money but in relationships, respect, purpose. She had become someone Friedrich would have been proud to call his niece. Her phone vibrated, a text from Eleanor. Thank you for everything, for changing, for growing, for seeing me. Sophia replied, fingers flying across the keyboard. Thank you for not giving up on me, for believing people can change, for teaching me that humility isn't weakness, it's strength. She put the phone away, picked up her bag and turned off the lights. Tomorrow would be another day of work, of decisions, of responsibilities. But she was no longer afraid, because she now understood that real leadership doesn't come from intimidation or power. It comes from serving, from lifting up, from recognizing that you are only as strong as the people around you, and that sometimes the greatest fortunes don't come from unexpected inheritances, but from hard-learned lessons about dignity, respect, and transformation. The invisible cleaning lady had become a respected executive. The arrogant CEO had learned humility. And a simple bet of $25,000 had changed everything forever. Because in the end, the real treasure was never the money. It was the journey. It was the transformation. It was understanding that every person has value, stories, dreams, if only we bother to see. And Sophia Hayes, heiress to $22 million, finally saw. She finally understood. She was finally, truly rich.